I'm so excited to talk with you guys today. My talk today is about the ingredients of empowerment. And I want this to be a hoorah for all Prenda guides. I want you guys, my goal and my purpose, I will have succeeded if after this talk, you're just like, yes, I am doing something amazing. If you feel that way, then it's just like, whew, I've done it. So we'll see if I can do it. All right, what if I told you that I have the most amazing cake recipe you have ever tasted? Okay, I mean, we're talking like moist, we're talking rich, probably 7 layers, because let's be real, that's what I want to shove in my face when I think of chocolate cake. And it's everything you want, okay? And if you're anything like me, you're gonna ask, okay, well, move on, give me the cake recipe, I need it now, right? So without further ado, because I like you guys so much, and because we have this shared Prenda bond, I'm gonna share it with you. So are you guys ready? All right, these are the ingredients. They are flour, cocoa, mayonnaise, soy sauce, with a hint of relish. Sounds delicious, right? Okay, if there's a few of you that are like not sure how to take me right now, I don't blame you. And like, I can just imagine this general like, going on in the background, and I'm not surprised. And the reason that I'm not surprised is because you know enough about what chocolate cake should taste like to know that mayonnaise and soy sauce and relish don't produce that taste. All right, so what ingredients do make a delicious chocolate cake recipe? Because let's be real, you guys, this is important for all of us to know. My students and I asked ourselves this question one day during a collaborate, and this is what we found. We found that every good cake is made up of core elements. First, you need the structure. You need an ingredient that gives the cake structure, like flour. And then you need liquids. You need milk and oil, right, to give the cake moisture. And then you need eggs. And eggs are the emulsifier that combine the milk and the oil together. And you need leavener, right? You need something to make those delicious air pockets in your cake, to make your cake fluffy. And of course, you guys, we need the sweetener and the flavor, right? And we also learned that baking is like chemistry, and that each of these ingredients need each other in order to create this final cake product. And so after we learned all this, we naturally, being Prenda people, right? We decided we were gonna try to prove it, okay? We were gonna test it, right? And so we sat down and we started asking questions. We were like, okay, do these ingredients really need each other? I mean, some of these ingredients are so small, like only a tiny teaspoon of baking powder. What? That hardly seems important, right? And then we started talking about how we like some ingredients, right? Like, I can get behind sugar, I can get behind some of these other things, but then there's other ingredients that when you taste it by itself, kind of gross. So you're like, well, I mean, wouldn't we make an even better cake if we left those gross ingredients out? Asking questions deepens your engagement with the subject and broadens your focus to stretch beyond what you already know. And this helps to develop your curiosity and your ability to seek out the edges of your understanding. We asked questions, and every discovery begins with a question. Asking questions and exploring them hands-on is what we do in Prenda. So we found a recipe and we followed it to the letter. And this was going to be our control cake, the one that we compared all of our other cakes to. And then we planned out our experiments. So in the process of 3 weeks, we were going to bake cakes. And these cakes would have too much leavener or too little leavener, too much egg, too little egg, too much sugar, too little sugar. You guys get the drift. I'm not going to keep going, but you know what I mean. And before we baked each cake, we would make a hypothesis about what we thought the results would be. And then after we were done baking, we had to sample, all in the name of science. So this is a picture of my kids. I'm a Prenda family guide. This is a picture of my kids sampling one of their sample cakes, or a video, I mean.
Tell me about the texture of that.
It's hard and crispy on the top, but liquidy on the bottom.
And what was this cake? What did we experiment with this one?
Too much sugar.
Too much sugar.
A horrible ending.
A horrible ending.
You think? You can look at the horrible ending right here.
Yep.
Whoa, it even sticked on.
It's sticking on. Oh man, you're the pan casualty. Tell me about the texture of that.
Sorry, guys. All right. So my students, as well as the neighbor kids, and as well as our chickens, they really enjoyed these 3 weeks that we did these experiments. They enjoyed the sampling part very much. And just as an aside, scrubbing that pan was no small feat. And what's really funny about this story, you guys, is that I had lined all of my other cookie sheets with foil before I started baking. And it turned out that I never needed it. And so when I got to this, we got to this experiment, which was our too much sugar experiment, I considered lining that pan with foil, but I was like, I haven't needed it in the past. It's going to be fine. And who knew that adding too much sugar would create like a boiling cauldron of cake in the oven? I mean, it was like boiling bubbles, boiling over. And I learned something that day about false assumptions. Just don't assume. Anyway, it was just kind of funny. Even when the results were terrible, and there were some terrible turnouts, as you can see from that picture, the kids loved it. The neighbor kids laughed and learned alongside my students, and it was fun to watch my students explain why the cake looked and tasted funny. It was really just hilarious. I'm going to skip this video because I don't know if we'll have time. If we have time, we'll come back to it at the end. But this is a funny video where my kids went out recruiting neighbors to come try their experiments, and we had some funny turnouts there. But from these experiments, there were 2 lessons that were learned very clearly for us. And the first lesson is there are basic ingredients needed in order to make a cake. And the second lesson was, and those ingredients need each other. So there's basic ingredients, and those ingredients need each other. In Prenda, our mission is to empower learners. We could say that empowerment is our chocolate cake. And as you might guess, identifying ingredients of empowerment has been a really important and ongoing conversation that we're still having. And like any recipe that you're given, when you use it time after time, you make tweaks and changes to it until it's perfect. So I'm sure you're going to see tweaks and changes to this recipe that I'm about to present to you now as it gets perfected over time. So there's still more to come on this, but we have found recurring themes that keep popping up again and again. We find these themes in books and research. We find these themes when we discuss with other guides, when we talk with other guides about their learning experience. We find these themes when we're experimenting with these, with our Prenda tools, with ourselves, with our schools and our families. And we've been doing essentially what my students and I did with our chocolate cake experiment. We've We've asked questions and we've learned and gathered and applied. And like my friend Seda Gilbert says, when themes come up again and again, it's significant. So I'm basing this recipe of empowerment on themes that keep coming up again and again for us. And our first theme, our first ingredient that keeps coming up is the principle of learner autonomy. And we define learner autonomy as the learner is the doer, the mover, and the becomer. When I think of learner autonomy, this quote from Dr. Seuss's "Oh, the Places You'll Go" always comes to my mind. It says, "You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose." I think of no other time when this is done more beautifully than when Prenda students decide on long-term goals that they want to achieve. And they want to work toward those goals every day on their calculators. Setting and achieving personal goals is not extrinsically, it is intrinsically motivating. It's a motivation that comes from within, that feels good from within. I see this every time my students click the "I did it" button in Prenda World. When they finish a goal, you guys know what I'm talking about, and they click it and there's this magical wand sound, ring. In fact, I have to remind my kindergartner frequently that he can't mark off his goals until after he's completed them, because he loves the wand sound so much on Prenda World. They feel proud of themselves and a sense of accomplishment. And as I see my kids get into this and get really excited about completing their long-term goals, I sort of half comically, half seriously think, can Prenda guides have long-term goal calculators? I would love one on my Prenda World account. Just throwing that idea out there. I think that would be really fun. There is plenty of research to be found regarding the benefits of learner autonomy. And I know for a fact that you guys are going to get into deeper discussions about this in your breakout classes later. So I'm not going to touch on everything with learner autonomy, but since we just finished talking about the importance of goal setting, I'm going to refer us to some interesting research about autonomy in regards to goal setting and how it increases a student's hope. So Charles R. Snyder, the creator of the hope theory, defines hope as the process of thinking about one's goals, along with the motivation to move towards those goals, which he calls agency, and the ways to achieve those goals, which he calls pathways. And I want to ask you guys if you heard those words. Snyder states that hope, which he defines as a positive belief in one's future and the confidence that you'll achieve it, depends on three things: setting a goal, agency, or the motivation to move towards that goal, and a pathway to move toward that goal. As I read this research, I thought, this sounds a lot like what we call empowerment. See, it's the same principle, it's just different words. And Snyder's hope theory is well known and respected among researchers today. In fact, Brene Brown mentions Snyder's work on hope and goal setting in her book called Dare to Lead. And Brene has this fantastic way of making scientific stuff make sense in real English language. So I'm going to quote what she says about Snyder's hope theory in her research. She says that hope comes when we identify a realistic goal, which is, I know where I want to go. And then we can figure out the pathway to get there. Even if it's not a straight line and it involves a plan B and scrappiness, it's, I know I can get there because I'm persistent and I will keep trying in the face of setbacks and disappointment. An agency is our belief in our ability to stay on that path until we've arrived, which is, I know I can do this. Referring back to Snyder's research, his studies have proven that goal-oriented hope significantly improves students' academic achievement, which he measured as their GPA, their school involvement, their school engagement, and it improved their well-being. it decreased their stress and it decreased their anxiety. These same findings about learner autonomy in education are also found in the self-driven child. In the self-driven child, it says, over the last 60 years, study after study has found that a healthy sense of control goes hand in hand with virtually all the positive outcomes we want for our children. Perceived control, the confidence that we can direct the course of our life through our own efforts, is associated with lower stress, positive emotional well-being, greater internal motivation and the ability to control one's behavior, improved academic performance, and enhanced career success. Like exercise and sleep, it appears to be good for virtually everything, presumably because it represents a deep human need. Did you guys hear that? Increased academic performance, lower anxiety, lower stress, increased motivation. Do you see those recurring themes? As you can probably tell, it's so exciting for me to see these themes pop up again and again. And why is that? Because it tells me that if I want empowerment for my students, if I want them to feel motivated, and if I want them to have excellent academic performance, and if I want them to have increased well-being, it tells me that autonomy is one of those basic ingredients to get there. And this is so helpful for me to know for two reasons. Because it gives me a why behind autonomy. And knowing the why and what the end results will be for my students gives me the motivation to keep at it, even when it's tough. And it gives me the confidence that what I'm trying to do will be worth it in the end. But remember, Snyder says a goal without a pathway won't lead towards empowerment. So this is what leads us to ingredient number 2. We're going to talk about the pathway. The next ingredient of empowerment is this idea of tools and skills. It's this concept of, okay, what tools and behavior skills do I have that will support me in my efforts to reach my future goals, or my future me, like we call it in Prenda? And when I think of autonomy principles and tools and skills, I think of building a castle. I think of the autonomy principle as the blueprint of the castle. And I think of the tools as the chisels and the hammers and the saws. And these are the things like our mastery-based ed tech programs, our house agreement, our future me, all these tools that we're giving students to use their autonomy well with. And then skills. And skills are like the all in between things that you need to know. So if I'm building a castle, I need to know how to level the land. I need to know architecture. I need to know weight distribution, right? And so we need to have the blueprint, the end goal, right? We need to have the tools, the workable tools in our hands, but we also need to know how to use these tools well. And that's where skills come in. So I want to talk a little bit more about the skills portion of our tools and skills ingredient here. I'm gonna refer to another study, you guys. So bear with me, it's a little wordy, but we'll get through it. In a study called Dimensions of Hope in Adolescence, Relations to Academic Functioning and Well-Being. Okay, that was a mouthful, I know. That's what the study was called. Researchers studied which one was better at producing hope in teenage students and concluded that, listen to this, to fully nurture youth's cognitive hope, teachers should strengthen existing skills, as well as develop new skills to help students learn how to set realistic and attainable goals. The routes to goal attainment, all of which can take time to develop, may require repeated reinforcement. So did you see that? We've got they need to develop new skills to learn how to achieve their attainable goals. And that those new skills provide them routes to attain those goals. At Prenda, we believe that kids will do well if they can. And doing well is always preferable to not doing well. So if our students are in a rut in their educational journey and they find themselves stuck, we first see if they're using the right tools, right? And that's why we have different math programs and things. But we also look at their skills. What skills do they need that they lack to reach their future me? When a student is in a rut, we don't focus on their behavior because there's no growth from there, right? Rather, we focus on the skills the student is lacking and the expectations he or she is having difficulty meeting. This would be what Charles Snyder calls a pathway. And this correlates right alongside with Alison Gopnik's work on the gardener and the carpenter mindset. In this book, in this research that she made about the gardener and the carpenter mindset, she makes this point that we don't call a struggling plant lazy, right? We ask ourselves, what is the plant lacking and what does it need more of? And we support our students in learning new skills in Prenda, in what they're lacking and what they need more of. Through the learning skills bridge, as well as collaborative problem solving. So let's touch on those two a little bit. So the learning skills bridge, you guys know this, you've all been through training. Our learning skills bridge has pillars, and each pillar is a learning skill that students and guides can talk about and practice that will help them become an autonomous learner. And we also find in Prenda that when we collaboratively, and we also find that we can teach students these new skills when we collaboratively problem solve with our students. Now, we initiate collaborative problem solving when we see our students in a rut and that they've been sort of like metaphorically spinning their wheels in the ground for a few days and they're not getting any traction. And our first step in collaborative problem solving, and this is what I love so much about Prenda, is we start with connection. And we start with connection we don't start with connection when we start collaborative problem solving. Connection happens all beforehand. It's something we build with our students that should be present as we start these collaborative problem solvings. And so ask yourselves questions like, does this student know that I care about him or her? Does this student know that I see greatness in him or her? And connection is our third ingredient of empowerment. So I'm not going to get too deep into that yet, but I want to share an analogy taught by Stephen Covey about connection and collaborative problem solving. So I think of connection as this, well, Stephen Covey teaches trust as this bank, that we all have a bank of trust inside us. And each time we as guides can proactively connect with our students when we say things like, I'm so glad you're here. Hey, I notice you. I see you. I see greatness in you. We're making deposits in their trust bank. And when moments come when we need to sit down with our students and collaboratively discuss a problem and come up with a solution, that is like, you can think of that as like a withdrawal from the bank. But if student's bank is very full, if he or she know that you love them and care about them because of all that connection you've built with them, if students know that you don't see them as a problem, that they'll feel safe and loved and they'll be able to engage in real conversation. And you'll be able to truly be able to engage in some worthwhile problem solving there. But on the other hand, if that trust is low, if the account of trust is low in the bank, the student will feel unsafe and no real conversation will happen. So going back again to collaborative problem solving, there's just a couple of other steps. I'm not going to go into them all today. Just touching lightly on some of these other things, but we identify what a problem, what is the problem, what is the lacking skill, right? And then we identify the solution and we arrange for a check back, which I love because it allows for experimentation. And of course we energize greatness along the way because there's always something great we can energize. So let's go back to our third ingredient of empowerment. I've already touched on it a little bit, but our third ingredient of empowerment is connection. Psychologist Yuri Bronfenbrenner best described a student's need for connection by saying that every student needs at least one adult who is irrationally crazy about him or her. We care about connection in Prenda. Why? Because when students feel securely connected to a loving adult, their best learning happens. Let's talk a little bit about connection in the brain. So there's 3 parts of your brain. There's an inner part, a middle part, and an outer part. And the inner part of your brain asks the question, am I safe? And the middle part of your brain asks the question, am I loved? And the outer part of your brain asks the question, is this logical? Students can't be in their thinking outer brain if they don't feel both safe and loved. Just like we just talked about with collaborative problem solving. So we want our students to always be in their thinking brain because that's when their best learning happens, right? So we need to make sure that our students, these questions, am I safe and am I loved, are satisfied. And we do this in Prenda through proactively connecting with our kids, our students, and responding to them when they have high emotion in an empathic way. So let's talk about empathy for a minute. Empathy is a type of connection that happens when our students experience high emotion, or we call it sometimes big feelings. And these big feelings, and I know you guys have all seen this because you've all been there. We all have kids who get frustrated with not reaching a learning goal, or they get frustrated with each other, and big feelings happen. They happen to us all. Big feelings are just part of life, right? And when this happens, going back to this brain idea, your students' brains are asking, am I safe? Am I loved? Am I safe? Am I loved, right? When they are experiencing this high emotion, they need those 2 questions answered first. So I like this idea of thinking of emotions as waves. They come and they go. And what's been so helpful for me in my journey in Prenda to empower my students is to learn that I don't have to come up with the right answer or happify my students when they're experiencing high emotion. I just need to slow down, and I need to be with them while their emotional wave passes through. I was once writing a message to a team member about start with heart and empathy, and I accidentally wrote start with here and empathy. And my teammate responded back, and she said, hey, did you mean to write that? I was like, no. Hey, but that's a really great insight. Good on you for being so insightful. I just can't type very well. I'm not very good at typing. So empathy is listening. It's listening with no judgment, and it's just being there with your student while their emotional wave passes through. And that builds trust, and that strengthens relationship in a way that nothing else can. We also proactively connect in Prenda through gathering, looking into each other's eyes, checking in, through laughing, through conversation. And you guys, so much of this is already built in the Prenda learning model. We have community circle at the beginning of the day. We have struggle and success at the end of the day. And we have so much beautiful connection that happens throughout the day as you learn alongside your students. Things like discussion and discovery and shared learning experiences. So to sum up, why connection is an ingredient of empowerment is because when students feel safe and when they feel connected, their best learning happens. But it's more than that for us, really. In Prenda, we care about the minds and the hearts of our students, and every student deserves a champion. Ingredient number 4 is mindset. And I don't know about you, but when I think of mindset, I'm always thinking the power of yet, which cues up that song for me by CJ Lucky that we talk about in our training about the power of yet. If you haven't seen it, you should, because it's catchy and it'll be one of your favorite songs. When I think of growth mindset, this quote from our Prenda core values folder, it's not a quote, it's actually a poem from our Prenda core values poetry folder comes to my mind. And it actually was such an an impactful poem to us that our school decided to memorize it. And it says, "You can do as much as you think you can, but you'll never accomplish more. If you're afraid of yourself, young man, there's little for you in store. For failure comes from the inside first. It's there if you only knew it. And you can win though you face the worst, if you feel like you're going to do it." Our thoughts are the blueprints of our lives. What we create with our hands must first be created in our minds. Growth mindset fills our minds with positive mental scripts like, "I can do hard things." Or this is one we're currently working on right now. "Some things might take me longer, and that's okay." Those are positive mental scripts we want our students' minds to be filled with. The greatest battles of life are fought out daily in the silent chambers of our soul. I feel this often, and I know you guys do too, and Jody's could probably talk so much more about this than I could. I'm really excited to hear her talk after me. But life has its peaks and its valleys, and we can't protect our students from those, and neither should we. But with the help of mindset, our Prenda students will be well prepared for their daily battles in the silent chambers of their souls. So I have a couple stories that I want to share. When I was preparing this talk, I was tempted to look up a lot of research. And there are a lot of studies that talk about mindset. That's really cool. But what I really care about are the changes that I've seen in my children's lives. So I'm going to share two stories with you, one about growth mindset and one about energizing greatness. And this is my growth mindset story for you. One day I was in the car and I had just gotten off the phone and I had just taken a really big deep breath. You know, just one of those breaths, right? You guys know what I mean. And my son, who's very perceptive, he asked if I was okay. And I told him that I was climbing my mountain and that it was hard work. And then he said, "Do you know what I do when I'm having a hard time?" And this is one of those like gold standard moments as a parent where you're like, "Yes, tell me, teach me." And in your mind, you're like, "Oh my goodness, this is incredible." And so I said, "What?" And he said, "I take some deep breaths and then I try again. And if that doesn't work, I walk away and I take a break and then I try again." And he says, "I always try to think I can do hard things." Now, this is a son who's been in Prenda for 2 years. And I thought at that moment, wow, here's my son teaching me about growth mindset. And just like Kelly said in his stories before, what a warrior. When you're talking about fighting those daily battles within the silent chambers of your soul, what a warrior he already is. And I can just imagine what he'll be able to achieve in the world with that kind of mindset. All right, here's my next story. I have another son who's very intense. Like on the intensity scale, he responds very intensely to things. And he has two very capable older brothers who, when he feels very intense, they'll step in and they'll do things for him. And so he's grown up with this very incapacitating mindset that he can't do things and that he needs help. He needs someone to come in and take over for him. And he would express it in like lots of big feelings, lots of meltdowns. And I would try to show all this evidence. You know, you are capable. You can do this. The reason I have a picture of taking out the trash is this is what we started with him. You're capable of taking out this trash, buddy. You just scaled the dryer and climbed up the cabinets above the dryer to get like this tiny Jolly Rancher that you knew was up there that I had thrown up there. Like you can do incredible things when your mind is set on it, right? You can take out this trash. And he would not believe me, and just lots of intensity there. And so I tried, I even tried like teaching him scripts. I tried incentivizing him with like behavior beans, right? Like, hey, you be calm, I'll give you a behavior bean and it'll grow. I mean, I tried so many different things. And he just had this firm belief that he couldn't do things. And then I learned about energizing greatness, which is something that we're all taught in Prenda. It's in the culture handbook. And I learned about the importance of catching him in the moment and energizing his greatness then. And those are firsthand experiences, letting him see right then and there, hey, you are great. Look at you. And so with this story of taking out the trash, when it was chore time, I would say, hey, buddy, it's time to take out the trash. And he would look at the trash and then he would melt down. And instead of focusing on the meltdown, what instead I focused on was that he looked at the trash. And I started energizing that. And I was like, oh, I just saw you look at the trash. That's your first step towards doing it. You're well on your way, buddy. And then I'd help him with the rest. And we did that for a couple of days. And then it was, hey, you walked towards the trash and looked at it. Oh my goodness, you're such a go-getter, right? Like, look at you. You're doing this. You already are doing this. You already are great. And it was small and it was painful steps, but he started seeing himself in the moment of, wow, I really am doing this. Like, I walked towards the trash. I really did that. That really was a first step. And then he took out the trash and he dragged it across the backyard and broke open the bag and spread all the trash out in the backyard. And I was really tempted to focus on the trash spread out in the backyard. But instead, again, I wanted his mindset to change about himself. So I focused on, look at you. 2 weeks ago, you couldn't even look at the trash. And now you're pulling it across, putting it in the trash can. Let's get together, pick up this trash and throw it away. And now, you guys, this son, who I had tried everything else to do to change his mindset, now through energizing greatness, when it's chore time and it's time for him to take out the trash, he looks at me and he says, that is my best job. And he sees himself as a person who is capable and who can do hard things. Because of what I learned in Prenda, I was able to translate that to him and was able to change his limiting mindsets about himself as someone who can do hard things. Our fifth ingredient of empowerment is purpose. And this purpose asks the fantastically awesome question of why? Why am I doing this? Why does this matter? This is future me. This gives purpose to the struggle. I like to think of this as stopping to take a minute as you're hiking up your mountain, because we're all hiking up our mountains in Prenda, right? I like to think of purpose as stopping to turn around and to check out your progress. I like to think of it as saying, look how much closer I am to my future me. Remember how far you've come, not just how far you have to go. You're not where you want to be, but neither are you where you used to be. We need to take those moments to stop and to take in the view and say, wow, isn't this incredible? If you want to predict where you end up in life, all you have to do is follow the curve of tiny gains or tiny losses and see how your daily choices will compound 10 or 20 years down the line. Tiny battles like these are the ones that will define your future self. Time magnifies the margin between success and failure. It will multiply whatever you feed it. And this takes us full circle back to setting goals and principles of autonomy. Isn't it neat to see how each of these ingredients are so connected to each other? They really do build on each other, and they depend on each other in order to be successful. Do you remember the takeaways from our chocolate cake experiment? They were, number one, there are basic ingredients needed in order to make a cake. And number two, that those ingredients depend on each other. They need each other in order to make that final product. These are the ingredients that lead to empowerment. And like ingredients of my chocolate cake recipe, these ingredients need each other. We can't leave out an ingredient and double the one that we like and still expect empowerment. These are all equally important and they're all equally needed. And we can have confidence that these ingredients are sound, not like my relish and soy sauce ingredients that I was trying to throw in at the beginning. These ingredients are sound, and these ingredients will produce empowerment. And to end, I just want to take a minute and give you all a shout out. I have the most incredible experience every week to rub shoulders with you all. I get to talk to you in trainings. I get to learn about your students. I get to learn about yourselves. I get to learn about your struggles. I get to learn about your real life. And I get to see every week how you're bending over backwards and sacrificing so much for the hope of blessing children's lives. So, to all of you guides who have laid in bed in the mornings, so tired that you don't think you can get up, but you do because you have students that are depending on you, I thank you. And to all you guides who try and fail and try and fail and try and keep getting up again and again because giving up is not an option, I also thank you. And to all you guides who are balancing so many other things like school and work and family and other responsibilities, but every day you put on your superhero cape and you attempt the impossible. You are beautiful and you are incredible. You are doing something vulnerable, something that you most likely have never done before. I feel that. For me, every day in Prenda seems like it comes with new challenges and new questions. And I teach this stuff, but I leave this with you. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. You are all on the path of creativity and change. You are in the arena. You are daring greatly, and I am honored to be counted along with you. Thank you.